Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
Sometimes the best way to find a living is to stay right where you are and study with UAS online. Career-specific distance programs from the University of Alaska Southeast are the fastest way to increase your earning power.
We connect all over the world.
The National Weather Service.
Good Friday evening, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service. It is the 2nd of September. We're nearing our 3-day holiday weekend. Many of you probably have a head start on that. As always, you can get more information anytime from NOAA Weather Radio or listen to that on the Marine Band. You can call the Alaska Weather Information Line at 800-472-0391. Find us on the web at weather.gov/Alaska or give us an email. Send us a note or two. Tell us what you like. Tell us what you hate, what you don't like. And we'll get to that in just a minute. nws.ar.tvweather@noaa.gov is the way to reach the Alaska Weather TV team. Again, complaints, suggestions, comments, or just general questions about the website. I'm happy to walk you through any of those new web pages to help you find what you need when you are on National Weather Service websites. And now, a programming change. Yeah. You saw just a moment ago that the show times were changing. And while that is true if you're watching an Alaska Public Media station, it's not the case if you're watching in Fairbanks or any community served by KUAC. The show time will continue to be 5:30 p.m. and live, just as we are right now. That really happened. If you're watching on the ARC system, on Alaska Public Broadcasting stations, as many of you are in the bush communities, the show will continue to be live at 5:30. If you're watching on 360 North, as you always have at 7:30, I'm recorded. Yeah, play that back again. I'm recorded. Yeah, I just said that. 7:30 p.m. is when you'll continue to watch the show if you are watching on 360 North. However, there is a change coming if you watch KAKM, if you watch KYUK, or KTOO. If you're watching in Juneau or Bethel or around South Central, including the Matanuska and Susitna Valleys, the Kenai Peninsula, and the Anchorage area. If you're watching on that system, which is Alaska Public Media, you will now see the show at 5 o'clock the next morning. It will be recorded, and it will be about 12 hours old or so. However, we have a solution for you. Check out the YouTube channel for Alaska Public Media. The specific channel would be youtube.com/AKwx TV, Alaska Weather TV for short. AKwx TV. You'll find it there first online before you find it on air now at Alaska Public Media. All of this begins on Monday, Labor Day, and if you're clicking around thinking, oh, I missed the show, and you're watching Alaska Public Media, remember you can watch it on the ARC system live, and you can watch it at 7:30 at 360 North. And all of that, again, if you're a cable or satellite provider, all those options should be available for you. Not a provider, a viewer. But all those options should be available for you. So don't fret. There should be an option for you if you experience that change and you go looking for Alaska Weather at 5:30 starting on Labor Day Monday. You don't have to wait until 5 o'clock to watch it the first time. You can watch it again at 5 o'clock in the morning when you're starting your coffee. Okay? All good. Here's the way it looks now for the satellite picture. We see a lot of dry sky across the lower and middle Yukon Valley, across the upper Kuskokwim. but clouds are creeping into the south and western coast and Bristol Bay. We've also seen fog reported in some of our Bristol Bay communities as a result of that moisture moving inland throughout the day. We've started to see more cloud cover creeping into south central, the Shelikof Strait region, as well as Cook Inlet. For southeast hit and miss cloud cover, the bulk of any precipitation chances for the next several days will probably be limited to southern parts of southeast. It really looks like the misty fjords will probably see the best region of rainfall in southeast, if any. It still looks fairly light considering what we see out to the west. We have high pressure in charge of most of the interior. And as we joke in the office, a lot of our weather discussions start with the very technical part. We call that the area forecast discussion. But a lot of those really start with a low pressure system in the Bering Sea. Well, really, that's what goes on most of the time, right? There's an area of low pressure disturbing the weather for many parts of the Great Land. And in this case, it is certainly true as we head into that 3-day weekend. You can see it wrapped up here. Low pressure south and west of Adak, and it's slowly creeping to the north and east. Out ahead of that is a frontal boundary, and out ahead of that is the very dry air that has been keeping most areas dry and warm as we have passed through the week. Up north, though, as is also typical, the dry air, not so much. We've got a cool north wind that has been bringing in that marine layer of air all the way down toward the Brooks Range and covering you up with clouds and drizzle and at times fog throughout most of the day, really. Clouds have been building up across the interior. You can see those dropping southward, drying up as they move over the Brooks Range. And that has been the case as high pressure is in charge and north of your vicinity. Because of that, that north wind continues to work its way into the region and keeping you pretty cool. You'll see that big difference there when we check the temperatures in a minute. Huge difference, in fact. Here's a look at the surface chart. High pressure sitting out across the Gulf at 1,022 millibars. That northerly flow is wrapping its way into southeastern Alaska. If you're west of that, it's bringing in more of a southerly and wet flow to places along the Alaska Peninsula into Bristol Bay. Dry conditions across the Alaska Range into Norton Sound, Seward Peninsula, and then we get into the clouds and the fog from the north slope with high pressure locking that in. Now, winds have been a little bit on the blustery side out here through the Bering Strait and across the northern Bering Sea. That will probably be the case for the next several days as the pressure gradient, the difference between high pressure and low pressure here, is trying to equalize. Well, it's sending air through that constriction in the land, and all of that is literally draining its way into low pressure. So if this is the hole, this is the pile of air trying to work its way into that vacuum at 996 millibars. Now, that is not a mistake. That is the thunderstorm symbol, and if you're in Adak, Atka, Nikolsky, Dutch Harbor and Unalaska, and eventually the Pribilofs, you may see and hear a thunderstorm as we head into the weekend. Low pressure is working its way north and east, and in this region, if you can imagine a cake, a layered cake. At the very top is cold air, at the very bottom would be warm air, and that warm air, just like a hot air balloon, likes to bubble up into that cold air. As long as you have those layers stacked just like that, you can get those rising air currents that make showers and thunderstorms possible. That's the case as we head into Saturday and Sunday. So places again like the Pribilofs, Adak, Atka, Nikolsky, Dutch Harbor, and Unalaska, and probably not the Alaska Peninsula. We'll keep watch on that. Into southwestern Alaska, we'll have a chance for those showers and thunderstorms. Look at southeast, clouds, but you don't get the rainfall out of it. So it's kind of go about halfway there. Showers for the Kenai Peninsula and Kodiak Island southwest all the way into the YK Delta. Most of the interior looks pretty dry. And then we've got clouds and fog and maybe some drizzle for the eastern Beaufort Seacoast, but more clouds than anything else on Saturday and certainly cool weather. IFR conditions likely over that region as well. For Sunday, showers move a little bit further to the west, to the central Beaufort Seacoast up toward Point Barrow. The Chukchi Seacoast looks fairly dry at this point, but cool and cloudy and foggy. Showers continue around the Misty Fjords, might creep a little bit further north into the central part of southeast. And for Sunday, showers over a large part of the Kenai Peninsula, Anchorage region, might even be full-on light rainfall throughout the period. South and western parts of Alaska will generally see showers and light rain, and there might be a rumble of thunder or two, again across the YK Delta, around the Pribilofs as well, all that east of that low-pressure system. Showers on the south side, watch for that, and again for southeast, a few showers around southern parts of the Panhandle more than anything else. Here's a look at temperatures now. Keep your eye on the north slope when we get there. 50s and 60s across southeast. Haines and Skagway fairly mild. Haines had you beat though. It's 70 degrees today, 63 in Sitka as well as many around Ketchikan and Annette. Hyder at 3 o'clock was 59 in the capital city, closer to the mid 60s. That's about what we saw around Prince William Sound today. Cordova was 63, 64 in Valdez, 67 in Anchorage, mid 60s in Kenai and 61 in Homer. Around Glen Allen, Gulkana, temps were closer to 70, about the same what you saw in Talkeetna today. 63 in Fairbanks, it was in the mid 50s around Eagle, 64 around Tok and Northway today, 55 in Fort Yukon, 52 in Arctic Village, and there's the north slope. That's what cool, cloudy, and northerly winds will do, putting temps back in the 30s and 40s there. Of course, the daylight hours are shrinking quickly as well, so that doesn't help anything. 58 today was the temp around 3 o'clock in Kivalina, 55 for our friends in Shish, and 63 in Nome, 43 for Savunga and St. Lawrence Island. Grayling was in the mid-60s today. Unalakleet, you saw 62, 65 out around Imanik, and it was 71 in Bethel, still fairly mild there, and 65 if you're watching from McGrath tonight. Southwestern temperatures back in the mid to upper 60s to about 70 around King Salmon, 67 or so around Lake Iliamna, 61 in Kodiak, 50s and 60s for the Alaska Peninsula, 50s for St. Paul and St. George, Adak and Atka, and 53 in Shemya. Now, overnight low temperatures will stay a little milder out across the west and southwestern regions, upper 40s to mid 50s there, all the way into Bristol Bay, 52 in Kodiak. Southeast, you're looking at mid 40s to low 50s. The capital city again, also very close to 50 degrees, 35 around parts of the Copper River Basin, upper 20s around Eagle. It's possible it's going to cool off tonight, 36 around Northway, 35 for Fort Yukon and Point Barrow and Wainwright, just a hair above the freezing point tonight. By tomorrow morning, you'll warm maybe a little bit up to about 39, 43 in Wainwright, 63 in Nome, Bristol Bay temps in the upper 50s and low 60s, Sand Point closer to 65, Dutch Harbor and Unalaska lower 60s for you. Southeast expect highs in the lower to mid 60s as well. Prince William Sound about the same, 66 if you're flying into Anchorage, 64 for Northway, 60 in Eagle, and closer to 70 if you're heading your way into Fairbanks, 61 in Fort Yukon. Flying weather looks pretty good if you're heading to any interior location or in South Central, but once you get out toward Bristol Bay and Kodiak Island, the Pribilofs, or the West Coast or the North Slope, you will start to have some issues there. MVFR to IFR conditions will be found in the morning, and for Southeast, expect IFR for the Misty Fjords region. As you get into the afternoon, that should improve. Northern passes look pretty good. Most of the Alaska Range passes look pretty good, but out across the western Alaska Range, you're going to start to see lower ceilings and at times with rainfall, poor visibility. IFR conditions are expected in the Pribilofs and for the western Aleutians, and watch for IFR around Kaktovik. West of that, mainly MVFR. Here's your pass conditions. Up north again, it looks pretty good. Anaktuvik and Adigan Pass, both expected to be VFR throughout your Saturday. Lake Clark and Merrill Pass will start to see diminishing returns as we go through the afternoon, so watch for changes there. And in Rainy Pass, again, it's going to move in from west to east throughout the day. Windy Pass, as well as areas out toward Isabel Pass, should be at VFR through most of the day. Mentasta Pass, we expect to be okay. Tanita Pass looks to be VFR through most of your Saturday, and Portage Pass right now looks pretty good. You may find some IFR a little bit further out of the sound if you're moving along the coast. Chilkoot and White Pass at this point look to be VFR. Freezing levels now show that warm air is sitting out across the Gulf, but most levels for southeast all the way through the interior are holding at or just above 8,000 feet. Out across the west, not a whole lot of a change there until you get way out to the west and levels climb to about 10,000 feet. So we're starting to see a change in the weather pattern, and we're going to see those levels drop as we go ahead into the next week or so. So this is probably about as high as they get, except if you're in southeast. You might get a little rise in those freezing levels as we get into early part of next week. Tomorrow's icing potential is still pretty high up there, 9 to about 10,000 feet. There is moisture to be had, but you're going to have to go pretty high up there to find that. Right now, a light to isolated moderate icing potential exists, but again, it's fairly limited. At the jet stream level, 30,000 feet or so, you're looking at more of a westerly flow taking a dive across the Bering Sea and the North Pacific. Our ridge of high pressure is still firmly in control of Alaska, but the days of that are going away fairly quickly as this low pressure system now is on the move and tracking eastward. That's going to put more of southwest Alaska into a southwesterly flow and eventually bring more moisture into more parts of interior, south central, and southwestern Alaska. Southeast, you're still kind of in the drier part of the system, but again, as this whole system shifts eastward, your weather is going to change as well. Look for areas on the north slope to continue to be under the influence of that Arctic jet that's coming in from the west, pretty much an east to westerly flow. That right now is over you at 70 knots. At 9,000 feet, you see our broad southwesterly flow working over the west coast and the southwest capes, including Bristol Bay. 15 to as high as 50 knots out across that region, so a good moisture pump working in your way. But if you're in the interior or even the west coast, you've got more of an offshore or east to westerly flow working through your region that's keeping you pretty dry. You can see the influence of that northerly flow and the jet stream above working in northwesterlies at about 25 knots for the north slope, and winds are fairly light across southeast, stronger winds offshore revolving around high pressure there. At 3,000 feet, our southwesterlies are still intact here. You can see those winds at 20 to 25. Across the northern parts of the YK Delta, the winds diminish a little bit and turn to more of an east to westerly flow. North and westerly winds for the north slope, and again, light winds across southeast, 5 to 10 knots, and also across south central, 5 to as strong as 20 once you get over the Alaska Range. So turbulence, again, is fairly limited at this point. We may see that change a little bit more as we go into Sunday and Monday as those weather systems start to move a little bit further onshore. Around the eastern Beaufort Seacoast, below 4,000 feet, across the western tip of the Seward Peninsula and up around Shishmaref, and out across the central and western chain. You're looking at some light to isolated moderate at best. All of that, again, fairly low-level stuff. That's a look at your aviation forecast. I'll have a sea ice update and your marine weather, as always, in just a few minutes.
Good evening. I'm Harry Keeling, and on behalf of the Alaskan Aviation Safety Foundation and Alaska Public Media, welcome to Hangar Flying. Our guest this evening is Ralph Gibbs, who is the new director of UAA's Aviation Technology Division. Ralph has an extensive background in flying and aviation education. He spent 26 years in the Marine Corps flying everything from Cobra gunships to the OV-10 Bronco. Throughout his career, he served in operational and staff positions, with much of that in the Pacific, in Hawaii and Okinawa. Ralph, welcome to the program and thanks for your service.
Thank you, sir.
After the Marine Corps, Ralph had various flying assignments and a number of increasingly important jobs in higher education, the last being at Eastern Kentucky, where he was the Director of Aviation and Chief Flight Instructor. He came to Alaska early in August, and we're truly honored to have him have such a professional in our aviation community. So, welcome to Alaska, and welcome to the show.
Thank you, sir.
You've only been here a couple of weeks, but share with us your first impressions of your new home in University of Alaska Anchorage.
Well, when you compare the aviation technology spaces, you walk in and I was immediately struck with a sense of, well, this is just like the Smithsonian. There's airplanes hanging from the ceiling. It's a very impressive place. So I'm impressed.
How about the people?
Lovely people. I have a staff of over 24 folks, faculty, and they're just, they are professionals at what they do, and they're just nice people. I would choose them all as friends.
Well, I can tell you, Ralph, because I've been an adjunct professor with UAA over the years, and I really enjoy going over there. I enjoy being around the students. You're going to have a great time here. It's great to be able to welcome you to Alaskan UAA. I know that you mentioned in one of our previous conversations your conviction about aviation and aviation for the future. Talk a little bit about that, what that means.
Well, the latest predictions are that there will be over 500,000 pilot jobs, mechanic jobs, support jobs over the next 20 years. And so there is a significant industry demand for aviation professionals. And I believe that we in Alaska and the Aviation Technology Division can make a significant dent in not only helping Alaskans gain their career goals, but to fill that industry requirement.
Well, you know, as I had mentioned to you, I think that this program is broadcast throughout Alaska. And in many of the smaller communities, there are people out there who have grown up being part of aviation. And I hope your words tonight and some of the things that we talk about will encourage them to think about a career in aviation, because it is a bright one, and you guys certainly offer a great opportunity to get into it. We'll talk a little bit about some of your ideas and vision. And it seems to me we were talking about some of the ideas you might have picked up when you were in the Marine Corps, but have a direct read across to general aviation and corporate aviation. Talk a little bit about safety, crew rest policy, and safety stand-down, those types of things.
So in Kentucky and here in Alaska, some of the things that I'm bringing with me from the Marine Corps, which I believe are the same in the Air Force, the Army, the Navy, Coast Guard, the airlines, some of those processes include a safety stand-down once every quarter, if you will, where we talk about accidents and incidents to roll back air crew complacency, to make sure that even that 15,000-hour fighter pilot knows it can happen to him or her. In addition to that, in our maintenance program, I have a triple redundant maintenance, which is just like the quality assurance programs of the Air Force, again, the Navy, the Marine Corps, where all aircraft squawks are reviewed 3 times, once by an A&P, another look by a second A&P, an airframes and power plant mechanic, and the third check in maintenance is by a post-maintenance check flight. Again, not unlike any of the military services or the airlines. Having a safety officer on staff to monitor and have safety programs, which is a requirement by the FAA. Crew rest.
Let's hold off on crew rest, because we're going to run out of time, and I want to get you back to talk about crew rest, because I think you've got some really good ideas. And I would point out, listening to what you've said, that it's like the post-maintenance test flight. There's absolutely no reason that any GA pilot out there who takes this airplane in for an annual inspection shouldn't be thinking in terms of, what do I need to do after that aircraft comes out of maintenance, as far as pre-flight, as far as the profile for the flight. So I want to talk a little bit more about that as well. But we need to get you back on next time to pick that up at that point. Appreciate you being on the program tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed tonight's program, and until next time, fly safe.
Time for a quick check of your sea ice update, and as you can see, the main pack ice, the concentrations that are higher than 80% shown here in white, continue to diminish as we go through the next several weeks. That'll be the case until it starts getting cold enough to actually create more ice. In the meantime, there are lower concentrations and brash ice that are lurking in kind of the navigational waters right there, and some of the tugs are reporting that to be the case. So don't be surprised if you see ice, especially with the north wind that's pushing some of that closer and closer to the coast. The good thing is that the coastal current is grabbing some of this and then zipping it along and moving it out of the way. So not all of that's going to reach the shore, but don't be surprised again if that north wind actually gets a few closer to the coastline over the weekend. You can always check the concentration, the forecast, and the mapping of all of this at weather.gov/Anchorage/ice. Here's a look at southeast weather now for the winds and the waves as we go through Saturday. Northerlies coming down the inner channels about 10 to 15 knots or so, 2 to 3 foot seas on the inside. Northwesterlies south of Cross Sound all the way to the Dixon entrance, 10 to 15 with 4 to 5 foot seas there. Southeasterlies though up around Icy Cape and Cape Fairweather, 10 knots with a 4 foot sea. Sunday, look for more of a southeasterly flow to kind of build southward a little bit more. Southeasterlies up the coast bring 5 to 6 foot seas. Light south and southwesterlies coming in south of Sitka to the Dixon entrance. The interior looking at 5 to 15 knots tops. The strongest winds in the Lynn Canal, of course, and through Clarence Strait, 10 knots with a 2 foot sea on Sunday. For south central, light and somewhat variable winds inside and outside of Prince William Sound and coming into Resurrection Bay from the east, about 10 knots with a 5 foot sea. Light and variable winds inside of Cook Inlet. The strongest winds will be over the Barrens around 20 knots, 5 foot seas there, 10 knots from the north and east through Shelikof Strait, and a southeasterly wind coming into Kodiak Island from the Gulf at 15 knots with a 6 foot sea. Sunday, look for a southwesterly shift on either side of Kodiak Island, 15 knots with 3 to 6 foot seas there. The winds in Cook Inlet start to build in a little bit more from the north and east. Look for easterlies crossing the Barrens at 25 knots with a 5 foot sea, and south and easterly winds for the north and western Gulf, 20 knots with a 5 foot sea. Inside of Prince William Sound, continue with light winds and generally small seas. 2-foot seas are expected through Saturday and Sunday. Southeasterlies inside of Bristol Bay with seas up to 3 feet, 6 to 7 foot seas across the Pacific coast on a 15-knot wind from the south and west. And you'll see southwesterlies along the Bering Sea coast from Cape Sarachev to Port Haydn as well with 3-foot seas there. For Sunday, the winds pick up a little bit more in some of the southern locations, 20 to 25, 5 to 10 foot seas there with the highest on the Pacific coast, of course, 6-foot seas from Castle Cape to Chignik. Southerlies inside of Bristol Bay, a 15-knot wind with a 5-foot sea on Sunday. And you can see those southerlies are also in charge for the central and eastern chain. For the Aleutians, there are 4-foot seas around Nikolsky to Unalaska and Dutch Harbor. Northerlies across Kiska to Attu could bring 12-foot seas in the Bering Sea coast. There are 9-foot seas in the Pacific. As we get into Sunday, look for more of a southwesterly push again for the central and eastern chain, 15 to 25 in the region, with 5 to 7-foot seas across the Bering Sea coast and 8 to 10-foot seas across the Pacific, with a west and northwesterly flow all the way from Adak out toward Attu. With 20 knots or so, 8 to 9-foot seas are expected there on Sunday. For the west coast, northeasterlies will continue around 25 knots. Again, it's going to be fairly blustery for St. Lawrence Island, Gamble, and Savunga out toward St. Matthew Island with 7 to 9-foot seas there. An easterly offshore flow from Hooper Bay to Macoriuk and more of a southerly influence for the Pribilofs and into Kuskokwim Bay with 4-foot seas on Saturday. By Sunday, look for that southerly wind to continue, 15 knots with a 4 to 5-foot sea. Winds are going to change around here or north of Nunivak Island and out of Eetolen Strait, and then northeasterlies continue out of the western part of Norton Sound and the Bering Strait, 25 knots with an 8 to 9-foot sea on Sunday. Now for the North Slope, again, that northerly influence is still there. Northeasterlies for the Chukchi Coast, 4 to 5-foot seas on a 20 to 25-knot wind, and a north and westerly influence for the Beaufort Sea Coast, 20 to 30 knots with 5 to as high as 9-foot seas there for the eastern Beaufort Sea Coast on Saturday. You'll see that diminish a little bit on Sunday with a north and northwesterly wind down to 10 knots with 4-foot seas. And for the Chukchi Coast, 15 to 25, those higher winds continue. And again, they're pushing through the Bering Strait, so they could be fairly blustery at times, 15 to 25. 3 to as high as 6-foot seas outside of Kotzebue Sound. That's your marine weather. Let's quickly recap the rest of the weather around the state. The big influence and weather maker is low pressure in the southern Bering that could bring a chance of thunderstorms to the central Aleutians and eventually over the Pribilofs and southwestern Alaska by the end of the weekend. Southeast, you look fairly dry. A few showers in the misty fjords over the weekend. Clouds and wet and cool weather increasing for south central and southwest. The interior mostly dry.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Support comes from the University of Alaska College Savings Plan, helping you and your child save for college every step of the way, from diapers to diploma. More information at uacollegesavings.com.